The secret of room 13. What would you do if a stranger whispered a secret that could change your life forever? That's exactly what happened to Claire Dawson, a young nurse who thought she was simply walking into another routine shift at St. Mary's Hospital. She had no idea that room 13 was about to pull her into a story of secrets, sacrifice, and choices that would test the very core of her humanity. The hospital at night was a world of its own. The hallways echoed with silence, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional shuffle of footsteps. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting everything in a pale, sterile glow that somehow made shadows feel darker, heavier. To most people, hospitals were intimidating during the day. At night, they felt almost haunted. Claire Dawson had grown used to this atmosphere, or so she told herself. At 27, she had worked enough night shifts to understand the rhythm. The stillness between emergencies, the quiet monitoring of patients, the way time seemed to stretch endlessly under the fluorescent glare. She had learned to sip coffee slowly, to listen carefully, to keep her mind steady. But even now, after 5 years in scrubs, the hospital nights still carried a strange, almost electric tension. That evening, everything seemed routine. Claire checked her rounds, moving from room to room with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew the weight of responsibility. Each patient had their own small story. An elderly woman recovering from surgery, a middle-aged man with complications from diabetes, a teenager with a broken leg who had finally dozed off. Nothing unusual, nothing she hadn't seen before. And then came room 13. Claire paused at the door, glancing at the chart clipped outside. Harlow Richard, male, 68. Stable, but under observation. She skimmed the notes. History of cardiac issues, admitted after a collapse in his home, tests still inconclusive. Nothing screamed danger. Nothing screamed unusual. Still, she hesitated, staring at the number on the door, 13. Superstition wasn't something she usually entertained, but she couldn't help the faint prickle at the back of her neck. Inside, the room was dimly lit, a single lamp glowing in the corner. The curtains were half-drawn, blocking the city lights outside. Machines beeped steadily, their rhythm oddly hypnotic. And there he was, Richard Harlow. His frame was frail, his skin pale against the white sheets, but his eyes were startlingly alive. "Good evening, Mr. Harlow," Claire said gently as she stepped in. "How are you feeling?" He didn't answer right away. He studied her with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably, as though he were searching her face for something specific. Finally, his lips curled into the faintest suggestion of a smile. "You're new." Claire shook her head lightly, checking the foreline. "Not new, just usually on different rounds. I'll be looking after you tonight." Silence stretched. The steady beep-beep-beep of the monitor filled the room, accompanied by the faint rustle of the sheets as Mr. Harlow shifted. There was nothing outwardly threatening, yet the air felt thick, like a storm was about to break. Claire turned to note his vitals when she heard his voice, low, raspy, and strangely urgent. "Nurse, I need you to do something for me. Promise me you'll listen." She froze, pen hovering above the paper. It wasn't unusual for patients to ask for small favors: water, an extra blanket, a phone call. But something in his tone was different. It wasn't casual, and it wasn't a plea for comfort. It was a command, cloaked in desperation. Claire glanced back at him. His eyes burned with an intensity that made her throat tighten. "What do you need, Mr. Harlow?" Slowly, with trembling fingers, he reached under his pillow. For a split second, Claire's mind leapt to panic. Was he hiding something dangerous? A weapon? But then she saw it. A small, metallic object glinting in his hand. He pressed it into her palm before she could protest. A key. Claire blinked in confusion, staring down at the cold metal. It was small, brass, unremarkable, except for the faint scratches that suggested it had been used many times. "What is this?" she asked, her voice hushed despite the emptiness of the room. His gaze darted toward the door, then back to her. His breathing quickened. "Locker. Basement. Before they find it. Promise me." The words hit her like ice water. "Basement? Locker? Who's they?" "Mr. Harlow, I don't understand." "Promise me," he interrupted, his voice cracking. "You're the only one I can trust." Claire's heart pounded. She should have called the supervising nurse. She should have slipped the key into the station safe and filed an incident report. But something about the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't madness. It wasn't delirium. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Her hand closed around the key almost involuntarily. "All right," she whispered, unsure why she was saying it. "I promise." The tension in his face softened. His eyelids fluttered, exhaustion overtaking him. Within moments, his breathing slowed, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm as he drifted back into a restless sleep. Claire remained rooted in place, staring at the key burning against her palm. 1,000 questions spun through her mind. What was in the basement? Why a locker? Who was he afraid of? Her instincts screamed at her to let it go, to drop the key into a drawer and walk away. She had taken an oath to care for her patients, not to dive into their secrets. But even as she tried to convince herself, she knew the truth. She wasn't going to be able to let this go. Because in that dimly lit room, under the shadow of room 13, Claire Dawson had just stepped into something much bigger than her. Something dangerous. The key weighed heavily in Claire's pocket all night, like a secret trying to burn its way out. Every time she adjusted her scrubs or reached for a pen, her fingers brushed against the cool brass, and her stomach knotted. She tried to focus on her rounds, but the thought kept creeping back. Locker. Basement. Before they find it. She replayed Mr. Harlow's whisper over and over, the urgency in his voice echoing in her head. She told herself it was absurd, that she was overthinking. Patients in his condition sometimes said strange things. Maybe it was just the rambling of a man half lost to medication and exhaustion. But she couldn't forget the look in his eyes. That wasn't delirium. That was terror. By the time her shift neared its end, Claire was exhausted from fighting her own thoughts. She could have clocked out, gone home, slept off the anxiety. But instead, when the ward grew quiet and the other nurses gathered at the station, she slipped away, moving down the hallway as if drawn by an invisible thread. The stairwell to the basement was colder than the rest of the hospital. The walls were painted a dull gray, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead with a faint buzz. Claire paused at the landing, her heart hammering. She knew she was breaking protocol. Staff weren't supposed to wander without purpose, especially not into restricted storage areas. But the key in her pocket seemed to pulse, demanding she keep going. Step by step, she descended into the bowels of the hospital. The basement smelled faintly of bleach and damp concrete. Long rows of metal doors stretched ahead, each marked with faded numbers. Some led to supply closets, others to maintenance rooms. At the far end, Claire spotted the lockers. Old, dented, painted in chipped white enamel. They looked like relics from another era, forgotten by time, but still standing guard over whatever secrets they held. She pulled the key from her pocket, her hands trembling. Which one? Her eyes scanned the rows until she saw it. A locker marked 113. The number caught her breath. 13 again. Always 13. The key slid in smoothly. For a moment she hesitated, a voice in her head screaming at her to stop. If you open this, there's no turning back. But curiosity, no, something deeper, a pull she couldn't name, pushed her forward. The lock clicked. The metal door creaked open. Inside, wrapped in an old canvas bag, was a stack of objects that made her chest tighten. Files, photographs, and a small, black notebook bound with cracked leather. Claire pulled the bag out and set it on the floor, her breath coming faster. She flipped open one of the files. Medical reports. Dozens of them. Each stamped with the hospital's insignia, but these weren't routine. The names were unfamiliar, the conditions vague, but every file ended the same way. Patient transferred. Status, confidential. Transferred. Confidential. Repeated like a code. She turned to the photographs. Some were blurry, taken in dimly lit hallways. Others showed people, patients, faces pale and frightened. One image made her stomach flip. A young woman, no older than 25, strapped to a hospital bed, her eyes wide with panic. In the corner of the photo, the room number was visible. 13. Claire's hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the photo. Finally, she reached for the notebook. The leather cover was worn, the edges frayed. She opened it carefully. Pages filled with cramped handwriting stared back at her. Mr. Harlow's handwriting. They are experimenting. Patients disappear. No records. They choose those with no families, no visitors. No one to ask questions. I was next, but I pretended to collapse before they could move me. I've hidden everything here. If someone finds this, if anyone is brave enough, they must stop it before more lives are taken. Claire's vision blurred. Her mind struggled to process the words. Experiments? Disappearances? This wasn't just a paranoid fantasy. The files, the photos, the detailed notes, it was evidence. A sound echoed in the hallway behind her. Claire froze, every muscle in her body tensing. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. She shoved the notebook and photos back into the bag, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the faint creak of a door opening and closing somewhere nearby. Someone else was down here. She pulled the locker door shut as quietly as possible and held her breath. Shadows shifted across the concrete wall as a flashlight beam swept past. Who's there? A voice called, deep and commanding. Not a nurse. Not a janitor. Security. Claire clutched the bag to her chest, her pulse racing. She glanced at the stairwell, just a few feet away. If she moved quickly, she might escape unseen. But if they caught her, if they found what she carried. Another sweep of the flashlight. This time it lingered on the lockers. Claire's body moved before her mind could catch up. She bolted, sprinting across the basement floor, the bag thumping against her side. Hey, stop! The voice barked. She didn't stop. She flew up the stairs, her lungs burning, the echo of heavy boots pounding behind her. Bursting through the stairwell door, she slammed it shut and twisted the latch, her chest heaving. For a moment, silence. Then a thud on the other side. Claire pressed her back against the wall, clutching the canvas bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. She was shaking, her heart threatening to explode. She had the evidence. She had the truth, or at least the beginning of it. But now she knew something else. Whatever Mr. Harlow had feared, it was real, and they already knew someone was onto them. Claire didn't remember how she reached the ward. Her legs carried her on instinct, her hands still clutching the heavy canvas bag, her mind a storm of panic. The fluorescent lights above seemed too bright, the hallways too empty. Every time she turned a corner, she expected to see the beam of that flashlight or hear the thud of boots behind her. By the time she reached the familiar door, room 13, her chest was heaving. She pushed it open, praying Mr. Harlow was still there, still alive. He was. The frail man looked smaller than before, his face pale against the hospital sheets. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of the door, and when he saw the bag in Claire's arms, his expression changed. Relief. And fear. You found it, he rasped, his voice weaker than it had been earlier. You shouldn't have, but you did. Claire stepped closer, her voice shaking. Mr. Harlow, what is all this? The files, the photos, what are they doing here? What's happening in this hospital? His hand trembled as he reached for hers. They told me it was treatment, that I was lucky to be chosen. But I saw the others. I heard the screams when they took them downstairs. They don't come back, nurse. They never come back. Claire swallowed hard, her throat dry. Experiments. He nodded slowly. People no one will miss. That's why they chose me. I don't have family anymore. No visitors. No one to ask questions, except you. His grip tightened, surprisingly strong. Now they'll come for you, too. A chill ran down Claire's spine. She thought of the security guard in the basement, the beam of light sweeping past the lockers. He hadn't been patrolling. He'd been hunting. I can't just stay quiet, Claire whispered. This is criminal. Someone has to know. Harlow coughed, a deep, rattling sound. His eyes flicked toward the door. Then you must be careful. They'll silence you before they let the truth out. The door handle rattled. Claire froze. Not a knock. Not the polite sound of a colleague checking in. This was sharp, deliberate, someone testing the lock. Harlow's eyes widened. Go, he hissed, his voice breaking. Hide the bag. Don't let them see. Claire's heart pounded as she backed toward the window. The blinds were drawn, but beyond them she could see the faint glow of the parking lot lights. Second floor. A drop, but survivable. The door handle turned again, harder this time. She had seconds to decide. With trembling hands, she shoved the canvas bag under Harlow's mattress. Keep it safe, she whispered. His hand caught hers briefly, squeezing once, as if passing her both gratitude and farewell. The door burst open. Two figures stepped inside, men in dark uniforms, not hospital staff. Their faces were hard, their eyes scanning the room like predators. One of them smiled coldly when he saw Claire. Nurse, he said, his voice too calm. We've been looking for you. Claire forced herself to stand tall, though her knees threatened to give out. It's late, she said, trying to sound casual. You shouldn't be in here. The man's smile widened. Neither should you. The second one moved toward the bed, glancing at Harlow with thinly veiled disgust. This one's overdue. Claire's stomach lurched. She stepped between them and the patient. He's under my care. You can't just move. The man snapped, his voice sharp. For a heartbeat, Claire thought she might faint. Then instinct took over. She grabbed the rolling tray by the bed and shoved it hard, sending instruments clattering across the floor. The distraction bought her a single second, but it was enough. She bolted for the door. Stop her. Heavy footsteps thundered behind her as she tore down the hallway, her pulse roaring in her ears. Nurses at the station looked up in confusion as she flew past, but Claire didn't dare stop. If she tried to explain, they wouldn't believe her, or worse, they'd be in on it. She reached the stairwell, yanking the door open. Her lungs burned as she sprinted downward, skipping steps, gripping the rail to keep from falling. The shouts behind her grew louder, closer. Basement or exit? She didn't think. She aimed for the glowing red exit sign and slammed through the door into the night air. The parking lot stretched before her, empty except for a few scattered cars. The cool night hit her face like a slap. She ran, her shoes slapping the asphalt, her breath tearing out of her chest. Behind her, the stairwell door crashed open. They were still coming. Claire dove behind a parked car, pressing herself against the metal, praying the shadows would swallow her. The men's footsteps echoed across the lot, their voices low but urgent. They were searching, hunting. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they would hear it. She knew one thing with terrifying clarity. This wasn't over. The bag, the files, the truth, they wanted it all buried. And they wouldn't stop until both she and Mr. Harlow were silenced. Claire clenched her fists, forcing herself to breathe quietly. For the first time in her life, she realized she wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a witness, and maybe the only chance to expose what was happening behind the locked doors of room 13. But to do that, she had to survive the night.